This week, Dr. Buckner and I are both going to speak about our professional experiences in relation to Matthew T. Pfeiffer's essay On the Border, Theorizing the Generalist from Transforming English Studies. My first reaction to this essay was, wow, this guy is describing my life. When I was getting my PhD at the University of Mississippi, the department there very much reflected the split identity that he is describing between scholar and teacher. As a student, I was expected to focus on literary studies, and in my coursework and advising, there was never any connection to my teaching self. Throughout graduate school, I taught first-year composition and introductory literature courses that were part of the university's general education program. At large Research 1 or R1 universities, full-time tenure-track faculty do not teach composition and often do not teach gen ed literature or any students who are not English majors or graduate students. At R1's, gen ed courses are staffed by graduate students, adjuncts, and non-tenure track instructors. Those with the least amount of job security, experience, and power are put in the courses that are the most difficult to teach, and they are given very little support by the department or university. This happens for two reasons. The first is economic. Even though students pay the same tuition per course, the university does not pay graduate students, adjuncts, and instructors the same rate per course as tenure-track faculty. So the university saves an enormous amount of money by putting the responsibility for the general education of their students onto the inexperienced and the underpaid. While I was given a good opportunity to practice teaching, very quickly I learned the university valued me as cheap labor. Now I am coming to my second reason why it is necessary for R1s to push teaching onto graduate students. The full-time faculty cannot both teach full-time and do the research that they are expected to do. At the University of Mississippi, English department faculty are required to teach 3 courses in 2 semesters. Here at Gardner-Webb, I am required to teach 4 courses in 1 semester. Of course, R1 faculty have the stress of publishing books and articles and the pressure to distinguish themselves in their research field. My point is not that their lives are easier, but that research faculty would not have the time to research if they taught more, especially if they taught composition courses to first-year students. Something Pfeiffer does not discuss, however, is how this emphasis on scholarship is a fairly recent development. Here I'm going to refer to another book, The Last Professors by Frank Donahue. As he shows, it was not until the 1960s and 1970s that English faculty were pressured to publish scholarly research, preferably books. This pressure trickled down to graduate students, and the dissertation became the first draft of a book. That way, when graduate students got jobs, they would be ready to move quickly towards publication. The book became the gold standard, especially in R1s, and a faculty member would not receive tenure without one. So in order to keep your job in R1, you have to produce lots of scholarly research, and you can be a terrible teacher. This is why, as Pfeiffer points out, my graduate faculty were training me to be like them, to focus on research. However, there was no recognition that the jobs I would be qualified for would be teaching jobs, not jobs like theirs. As Pfeiffer argues, PhD programs are not professionally preparing students for the realities of the job market, for positions that require full-time teaching and teaching courses outside our specialty area. When I arrived at Gardner-Webb, I understood that my job was to be a generalist. 3/4 of my teaching load is gen ed, both first-year composition and a survey of world literature. Some semesters I only teach gen ed. The content of my graduate courses did not prepare me for this, nor did my department do any training outside of coursework. I never took a class in rhetoric and composition, and I certainly never took a class in many of the cultures covered in my World Lit survey: China, Japan, Russia, India, to name a few. What Pfeiffer does not discuss, however, is that I did learn a set of skills in my graduate coursework and through studying for my comprehensive exams, one of which covered British literature in the 19th and 20th centuries. For example, from my graduate classes, I learned how to run a course, how to combine both close reading and theoretical approaches, how to lead discussion, when to push students, and when to cut them some slack. I also learned from the weaker teachers what not to do. In my comprehensive exams, while they were focused on British, not world literature, they did cover a wide sweep of time, so I learned how to put together a survey of literature. I use these skills in my classes daily. I do wish I had had more training, not only in composition studies, but also in education. How to put together a syllabus, for example, classroom management, creating learning objectives, practical skills like that. I think if departments followed Pfeiffer's suggestions and created more cross-disciplinary opportunities, then traditional literature students would learn a lot from Rhet Comp and English Ed. I also think it should work the other way, with composition and English and education cross-training in literature. Pfeiffer doesn't talk about that it doesn't necessarily work both ways. I agree with Pfeiffer that writing and rhetoric should be stressed in a generalist degree, but why not include literary analysis for the non-literature track as well? Finally, in his essay, Pfeiffer worries that his proposal for generalist studies would create a professional underclass of generalists versus specialists, but I would argue that this hierarchy already exists. His solution would just make it visible and would force departments to confront reality and better prepare their graduate students for the jobs they are actually going to get. The reality is that universities typically hire up. That is, they hire faculty from universities better than themselves. So if I had wanted my graduate advisor's job, then I would have needed to get my PhD at Stanford, not the University of Mississippi. My advisor was a wonderful teacher and mentor, but preparing me for his job was somewhat ridiculous. I think Pfeiffer combines both common sense and a practical approach to turn frustrations into challenges and opportunities. I also appreciate how he is trying to be proactive and to solve problems rather than just pile onto the crisis mentality. I'm doing one of the discussion launchers this week, and in my prompt there, I would like to address Pfeiffer's ideas about different types of scholarship, starting on page 189 of his essay. Lastly, as I have been delving into the readings from both of our textbooks, I would like to point out how the essays from English Studies are similar to what we're looking for in your issue reports. That is, they mainly describe and summarize, and they do not make arguments. On the other hand, the essays in Transforming English Studies take positions. Eventually, in your position piece, we will want you to take a stand on one of the issues, like Pfeiffer does. Pick a side and make a recommendation. In my introductions in the weeks to come, I want to talk about this further.